Hey, welcome to Why is blockchain technology so important? This is going to be an incredible, probably 4-year college course within 30 minutes. So it's you may think some of the information is not that important. It really is important. I think you'll see it. So my suggestion is just grab a cup of coffee and a notepad. You can always go back and forth, but write down any notes you have and you can email me these questions because I don't think anybody has really ever told most people these things, and it's really pretty incredible. So let's get started. So why is it so important? The way we have, in order to understand why it's so important, we have to figure out when did blockchain technology start. So it existed, it started, it launched in 2008, 2009 with Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper. That's what launches something. Possibly it was due to the economic meltdown, but we don't know for that for sure. But whatever, the world was absolutely fed up with corruption and it didn't want corruption to continue, and I agree with that. I hate corruption, and that's what we do at Smart Community Technologies is fight corruption. Now, you can go back and click on this or grab it and highlight it, put it in your browser. You can read all kinds of things of what were happening in 2009, with 2008 with that meltdown. Now, when did the internet start? So remember, blockchain technology started here 08, 09. So we got the meltdown here in 08, 09. When did the internet start? Well, it's kind of interesting. Mainstream adoption, dial-up connections, we didn't know anything in 2000. In 2001, all of these protocols are controlling the connections that we have today. Protocols control the connection. So everyone's heard of IP, TCP, VoIP, all this stuff. Do you know what the P is in that? It is protocols. So, internet protocols, transmission control protocols, voice over IP protocols, and smart mail protocols, hypertext transfer protocol. All of this is protocols. The P is always a protocol. Then in 2002, without these current internet protocols, no blockchain protocols would be possible. That people don't realize that, but it's built on top of existing internet protocols, and that's why it's important. Now, here's an interesting date. June 29th, 2007. The first iPhone is released. So many of us don't realize how recent all of this is. This is yesterday. So this is how everything is coming to existence right now. Now, what is a protocol? It's just a method by which data is sent from one computer to another. Here you are seeing a picture of the first ever transantarctic cables laid, okay? Boom, can you imagine this? Many people think that cloud technologies like Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, all of these cloud technologies are in the air. No, they're at the bottom of the ocean. And look at these dates. This is what shows you how incredibly fast everything is happening. Really, in 2010, just 9 or 10 years ago, half of rural households could even get on the internet. And in 2011, 21% only had dial-up. And so just look at these. They're 2013 Google Fiber. So the first time we're actually looking at Google Fiber is like just 6, 7 years ago. And 2013 is when these fibers were laid to even give us connectivity that we have today. So this is just absolutely incredible. Now, how does the world operate in 2020? Well, you might type a URL into Google Chrome, which, by the way, when was that launched? 2008. Are you starting to see like a pattern when everything was launched? So we might type a URL into Google Chrome, right? In your browser. So a web browser, usually Chrome, connects to a domain name service, and it can identify the internet protocol address of where that website is hosted. Once the host is identified, the browser that you're using sends an HTTP, that's a hypertext transfer protocol, request to the server, which is owned by the browser, like Google, and it's owned via a TCP IP stack. transmission control protocol. See, it's all about these protocols, isn't it? Who owns the data when these protocols are used? Where is the data stored? Could it be stolen? Could it be used without our permission? Blockchain technology works in direct contrast to the status quo of today. Our current system allows the owner of the server or the owner of the browser or whatever you are using. Current technology allows that company to own that data, and then it's stolen and used without our permission because it's not owned by you. This has been a massive disaster, and this is the way the world operates now. We're not talking about 10 years ago. This is the way it works now. This is all changing, and this is why it's so important. We'll get to that as we go. Now, as we can see, it's all about the protocols. So what are blockchain protocols? If this is the way we do things now, how do we do things in the future? Well, one thing is they are built on top of traditional protocols, but then everything changes drastically. Now, remember, blockchain protocols are a method of sending information. So what are the blockchain protocols in contrast with the internet protocols? Well, not all blockchain protocols are the same, of course, but they do share 4 defining characteristics. And we're going to go over these real quick, and then you have your 4-year college class in about 30 minutes, maybe 20. So, distributed ledgers, encryption, consensus algorithms, and connected blocks of data. Now, that may sound simple, and it kind of is, but we're going to break it down a little bit. Now, these 4 combined are called the God Protocol. Now, I didn't call it that, but we're going to investigate that because of what they do. And so this is an absolute master mix and match of things that weren't in existence, and we'll cover all that. So let's go. Why is it called the God Protocol? Well, because when you combine these protocols in the fashion that blockchain did, they are immutable. Nobody owns anything. It's not owned by any entity. They're permissionless. They can be permissioned, but often they're permissionless. Excuse me, because if they're not owned by anybody, then that means you can just go ahead and jump on without asking any permission. They're all transparent. They're completely honest. They're trustworthy. The data can't be hacked. It eliminates confirmation bias. All of these things. Well, if these protocols do this, why would anyone use the status quo protocol? Why would we, if we have this available to us now, why are we on the old system where everything is stolen, where everything is hacked, where everything is used without our permission? Why are we on that? Well, we won't be for long, and this is why this is so important to kind of know the foundation of what is going on. Now, you can imagine who doesn't want you to know this? Well, obviously Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, they don't want you to know. They all became multi-billion-dollar corporations by utilizing the old protocols on the internet, which are only 10 short years old. It's already been a disaster. So they don't want to disrupt their party, but I think you do, because you know what that means? We're going to show you that that kind of revenue can come down to each individual through their own digital wallet. So this is really, we're going to get even more incredible as we go, but this is why you would never want to use the existing system. Now, let's break down these 4 things. We're going to break down the 4 things. One, distributed ledgers, encryption, right there. Break them down. Let's look at distributed ledgers first. What the heck is that? Well, why are they needed? 1, a distributed ledger is nothing more, and you can just read it, a decentralized database. You've heard this phrase, peer-to-peer. I like to use Pearson to Pearson. See, it's a computer-to-computer network where the transactions are shared and they're stored on everybody's computer, not Google's server, not Hillary Clinton's server in her basement. In other words, nothing is stored on a server that's in Hillary Clinton's basement, that's in Google headquarters, that's in Amazon headquarters. There is no centralized server that is owned by anybody, Google, Apple, Facebook, Netflix, whatever. See, do you see how this is totally transformational? It's a direct contrast to the client server architecture of today. With blockchain, you become a client and a server. Each person is a server. Everybody has access to it. Nobody owns it. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, how can that even work? We're going to get into that. So no central server. Everyone taps into the current servers through these same protocols, but the protocols change as we're going to find out. And whether this be, Alexa, cars, phones, refrigerators, do you realize that the status quo of what we're doing now with everything residing on centralized servers or centralized ledgers or centralized sources of information, that if we continue down this path, that whoever owns these servers, and you already know this in your mind, will own every human being in the world. People don't want to be owned by Amazon, by Google, by Facebook, by Netflix. Your liberties and freedoms are all at stake because of the technologies and how these big players have come in and now own it. Now, the original internet was supposed to be decentralized, but that quickly turned into a power grab. And now we've got 4 or 5 main players that own pretty much everything, and they are using it to control the world. They'll use it to control you. They'll use it to control the economy. Facebook already launched Libra. We talked about that before. Many things are going on in front of you that many people don't realize, and we now have the solution to take this back for our kids. It's incredible, right? So that's what this is. You can look at that later. Well, if all the information is on the computer, well, how am I protected? Well, thanks be to Jesus. What do you mean, Jesus? Yeah, Jesus Christ. Because the way we protect it by taking all of the ownership away from Amazon and Google and everybody else and putting it on everyone's computer so nobody owns it. Well, what are you talking about? Then does everybody get to see my transactions? Does everybody get to see what websites I go to? Does everybody get to see how I'm acting and what words I use and what videos I watch on YouTube? No. It's protected. How is it protected? By encryption. And these are taken from 2 words, but cryptography is how it's protected. And Jesus Christ is the launch of cryptography. People don't even know this. It's 2 Greek words called kryptos, translated crypto, which means hidden. You can look at all this stuff here. And graphe, or graphe actually, long E, no need to worry about it, which really means writing or scripture. And so you got kryptos, graphic, cryptography. It's just said right into English. Now, when did this whole thing launch? Well, Jesus kept referring to the writings, the graphe of history, as being hidden. He said it's all hidden in the writing, even though you read it in Hebrew. It was originally written in Hebrew. He said there's a hidden meaning. And there's only one writing he could be referring to. It wasn't the New Testament. He was referring to the Old Testament. He wasn't even referring to the Old Testament. There was really no Old Testament, really. It was just a compilation of writings and prophets and things of this nature. But that's what he was referring to, the whole foundation of what we now view as our Old Testament. There is no New Testament, so every reference to the word scripture or writing in the New Testament, of course it refers to the Old Testament, because there's no New Testament for it to refer to. It's pretty obvious, okay? But I'm telling you, what I just said, 99% of churches don't teach that. They don't get it. Every use of the word inspiration or doctrine that we see in the New Testament doesn't even refer to, because there was no New Testament. It refers to the Old Testament. How obvious is this? It's still 300 years before this New Testament is realized. But Jesus is the one who launched cryptography. He said it's all hidden. He said he has the key. We'll talk about that more later. Now, 2,000 years later, we finally realize cryptography is a good idea. And without cryptography, we realize that Google, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, and everybody else would just own us. And as you see, Jesus came to set us free. So cryptography was launched by him and realized 2,000 years later. Pretty incredible, isn't it? It really should be called the Jesus Protocol, but it doesn't matter because that's the same as God. But we won't get into theology right now. But here's the thing. I mean, are we safe due to the sheer volume of data? I mean, really, every word that I say, every letter that I type, every search on my computer, every inquiry, every record, everything. I mean, they can't, Steve Schroeder is just one guy among everybody. I mean, how in the world, you can't track everything. Well, yeah, hello, quantum computing. We just reached quantum supremacy on 9/24/19. More on that later. So you start applying quantum computing and AI, machine learning, you can own everybody. As a matter of fact, we can create a virtual Steve Schroeder that looks a lot better than the existing one, and he knows more than the existing one. If you ask most of us, what did you do yesterday at 9 o'clock? We don't even know what we did yesterday at 9 o'clock. If you ask the virtual Steve Schroeder, a 28-year-old perfect male, hey, Steve, what did you do 17 years ago, 3 months and 4 days? He knows exactly what you did. He knows all of this. So you start combining this and you kind of start to see the danger road that we're passing down, right? And why this is so important, so that we take power away from the very few in the elite and spread it back out to all of the people. It's incredibly important. It's whether or not our world is even going to exist in the way we think that it's going to exist, or whether we have any freedoms at all. So we're not safe due to the sheer volume of data, because we have capabilities now that people could only dream of. People don't even know about this today. Okay? But it's here. Now, what if Google were decentralized? You have a decentralized ledger, or what if nobody owned it? Well, there would be no Google. Most of their revenue would be gone. There is no big brother. Nobody can steal any data. Identity theft is eliminated. Nobody owns the data, so there's nothing to steal. Nobody can sell the data because it's all protected and decentralized all over the world. And they can't access it without the person who really owns it, that being me or you, without your approval. And then every time, and they could access it if they want to, but you just have to give them approval. And why do you think you would give them approval? Because you would get a deposit into your digital wallet. So can you imagine Google sending you an email and saying, hey, Steve, do you mind if I pick up your search history for the past 2 months? We could really use that so I can send you ads that would really fit what you want. And I'll be willing to put $200 into your digital wallet just for the last 2 weeks. Is that okay, Steve? Are you kidding me? No, that's what we're talking about. It's a completely new world, by the people and for the people. It's trustless because it's trustworthy. In other words, you can trust the technology because there's no entity that you have to trust. So because it is trustless and there's no intermediary to trust, that means it's trustless, and it's trustless because it's trustworthy. So it's kind of confusing, but there you get it. Now, let's go to the second one, because we have distributed ledgers. You can go back and see these lists again, remember? Where are they? Down here. See? Distributed ledgers, encryption, and then you can kind of go through those 4 again, because it's pretty lot. It's a lot of information. So let's look at number 2 now, encryption, after distributed ledgers. Okay, these are the protocols of blockchain technology. Encryption, because of the encryption and cryptography that we talked about, that allows each node or computer to be a client and a server. So there's no ownership. Like, who is the CEO of blockchain tech? Nobody. It can't be stolen, can't be hacked, it can't be sold, since nobody owns it in order to sell it. It allows permissionless adoption. It's like getting a job without going to work. See, do you see how this is so confusing to everybody? Because we're so used to people owning everything, or asking for permission to do things, or accessing our records at a tax file or a property file. Okay, ownership file. I mean, even when we sell our house, you've got title insurance, right? Well, you don't need that anymore. So how can this be? I mean, who runs the network? I mean, there's no boss. There's no who. How is it protected? Answer encryption. It's pretty. I mean, it's gonna get even more incredible as we go. Blockchain protocols, encryption blockchain protocols. The type of encryption that blockchain utilizes, that's why it is so secure. Never been done before. It's built on top of the existing internet protocols, not these encryption blockchain protocols. Their advanced encryption algorithms combined with other criteria, it's like a master chef. So these things were all mixed in proportion and launched in 2008. And it's taken us about 10 years, 11 years to figure out what is this and how does this advanced encryption work. It can be a little complicated, so put your thinking caps on because what we're about to learn is incredible for many reasons. Let's go for it. We're about halfway through done. First of all, what is an algorithm for encryption? Okay, well, here's the definition of algorithm. Don't panic about these things. It's a set of rules not subject to human interpretation. Already, I like that. Really? A set of rules where no human can interpret it? Yeah. I love algorithms. See, maybe we need bumper stickers. I love algorithms. But then people would think you were a geek, right? Not all encryption has similar protocols, though, that run the encryption. See? So the rules are set for encryption by an algorithm which is not controlled by a human. Now, blockchain encryption protocols have 3 core rules. Just 3. Garlic, salt, lemon, pepper, and paprika. No, it's hashing, public and private key authentication, and digital signatures. Now, digital signatures is not what you think, but we'll talk about that in a few slides. So, what is this encryption? Now, it's important to realize that encryption methods were not invented by blockchain technologies. They were just mixed and matched by blockchain technologies. These are existing protocols, and this type of cryptography has been around for many years with flawless results. However, like a master chef, the ingredients have been mixed and the results promise to change the world. Let's look at the first 3 core rules called hashing. Don't worry about this. And this was not invented again by blockchain. This has been around. Hashing is simply a mathematical function that does the following. It takes an input of any length, such as a letter, sentence, words, or an entire library. Let's just use the Bible, for example. The whole Bible could be put into one hash. So any input of any length can now be hashed. It's a mathematical function. It uses the mathematical function to create a random output or a fixed number of letters and numbers. Any small change in the input creates a completely different set of numbers and letters. These secure hashing algorithms, right, are known as SHA. This is where you get the SHA stuff. People have heard this, but they don't even know what the SHA stands for. Secure hashing algorithms. And all types of SHAs, whether it's SHA-1, SHA-5, SHA-256, whatever, they adhere to 4 key rules. What do you think those 4 key rules are? Here it is. The same input must always create the same output. Now remember, God and math are very similar because they're immutable. I love math. You love math, you love God. That's number 1. Number 2. 2 different inputs cannot produce the same output. So if you put a different input in, it can never come out the same. It has to be impossible to determine the input if you are given the output. Oh, okay. And any slight change in the input must completely change the output. Now I know that sounds confusing. Excuse me. But let me show you what I mean. Look at this. Here is a hash of a phrase, "Where's Rob?" Do you realize most people have never seen a hash of such a simple phrase? Congratulations on making it this far. Here's the hash. I can unlock this, and the phrase says, "Where is Rob?" But this is not encryption, by the way. Hashing is not encryption. It's just a step. Okay, now here is the hash of the phrase, "Where is Bob?" Do you see the change here? Just one letter from Rob to Bob. Look at the hash. It's not even close. It's not even close to where is Rob. Do you see? This goes back to this rule. A slight change in the input must completely change the output. Now, do you know what this means? Incredible stuff, I'll tell you. What makes hashing useful? You can take an infinite amount of content and reduce it to a set of 64 characters, let's say, right? So hashing of a file creates a string of characters that are unique to that file. So I could take the whole Bible, let's just use the Bible as an example again. I could put the whole Bible into a string of 64 characters called hashing it. And do you realize that if anybody changes one period, one comma, or one letter in the entire Bible, then I'm going to get a completely different output for that. This is how you verify everything being accurate. Because if anybody changes anything, it's going to change everything. This is why it is immutable. I tell you, it's just incredible. I can't even believe it. But how does blockchain then use this amazing hashing that has existed? Well, it does it to create digital signatures. It also uses it to integrate the blocks of transactions, which form an immutable ledger. Each block of transaction not only uses a connector phrase to link the blocks together, so that not only are the transactions unique to each little block of data, but the connector phrase is unique. Now, since they're connected in this fashion, hackers cannot hack one block without all the other blocks being affected. Every block from the Genesis block, and isn't it incredible that the first block is called the Genesis block? I tell you, there's a lot of theology and technology mixing here, but more on that later. Everything has to be changed. Like, who could think of this thing? Nobody even knows who the author is. Do you realize this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, is unknown? I mean, I don't know. And then they call this the God Protocol? I mean, like, it must be. Because who could have ever figured this stuff out? Now look at this. So we got hashing. Number two is encryption, public-private key authentication. So we got hashing, and what is public and private key authentication? Now remember, all of these methods were not invented by blockchain. They're just mixed and matched. So there's two types of public or private key authentication. One is called symmetric encryption, where you just have one key. The other is called asymmetric encryption, where you have two keys. One's a public key, one's private. But these two keys are mathematically linked. Now, all blockchains, every single one of them, they use asymmetric encryption, not symmetric encryption. They all have two keys. Now, here's what's neat. The private key controls the content, but the public key controls the portion of the content to the message or the amount of money. And since we're talking about, like, Bitcoin uses this encryption, this was initially started with Bitcoin. That was the specific application of this particular blockchain technology. But we have now learned, finally in 2020, oh wow, we can take what was used for Bitcoin and blockchain tech, and we can apply blockchain technology to other aspects outside of money. But the public key controls the portion of the massive content. So I can take, let's say, a balance of my bank account and send it out to a public key, with a public key. And I don't have to compromise my private key. So whatever balance, whatever message, whatever transaction can be encrypted with the public key without the private key being compromised. Incredible, isn't it? Excuse me. Now, what is a digital signature? That's the private key, public key thing. We talked about hashing. Number 3, digital signatures. What's that? Well, it allows the users to identify the validity of the sender. It allows users to confirm the contents have not been altered. Because why did we see? Because any little change changes everything. So if anything was altered at all, you're going to spot it immediately. And that's a digital signature. Now let's show you how that works. Here's the process. You simply take a message and you create a hash of that message. Now, as we said before, that doesn't encrypt it. The sender, me, let's say I'm sending you some money or a message or whatever. I encrypt my message or the hash. I encrypt the hash file by using my private key and sends the encrypted hash to the receiver. The receiver then decrypts my message with the public key, where I'm not revealing my private key. And then he takes the fully decrypted document and he hashes it. And then they confirm that the two hashes match. As we've seen before, any slight alteration will not match. So if a different private key was used, that's not going to match. If anything was altered in transition, it's not going to match. Nobody knows my private key. The public key and the private key are mathematically linked again. Don't you just love math? This is the most incredible use of math we have ever seen in the history of the world. My dad's a math professor and teacher. He loves it. I'm sure he does. This is the way it works. That's a pretty incredible system, isn't it? So here's just a quick review of these encryption methods that blockchain use. Hashing, public-private key authentication, and digital screen. See, we're almost done. Not bad. Review of 4 blockchain protocols. Remember these 4 blockchain protocols? Distributed ledgers, encryption, consensus algorithm, and integrated block. Now, we've covered 2, right? And encryption. We got 2 left. What is a consensus algorithm, right? Well, since there's no central authorities to make decisions, and since decisions need to be automated by every computer, each blockchain network needs a decision-making mechanism which forces or mandates a decision. So all the participants come to agreement, not because they're human beings, but because it is math. Math determines the proper decision. I just love math. Okay, this is what consensus algorithms do. They mandate a single version of the truth. They eliminate confirmation bias by code. They verify contents. They confirm recipients. They mandate truth and trust. And they do it all automatically with no human intervention. The reason, you want to know why banks and title companies and everything like that was invented? Amazon, Google, why are they here? Because we didn't understand consensus algorithms. We don't need any of them any longer. You got to be kidding me. I mean, you cannot get your mind around this in 32 minutes, but at least hopefully now you'll have a better understanding. We only got a few more slides left. Now, there's a lot of different consensus algorithms out there, and you can make new ones. I'm making a new one called proof of grace, not proof of work, but proof of work is one of them used by Bitcoin, for example. Proof of stake is another. We're not going to get into all that. I'm just going to go over one right here. And the way proof of work works is like this. The network participants verify the transactions through computing a complex math problem again. Now, whoever solves the problem first gets the money. Now, once consensus is reached, the complexity provides another layer of security because there's an enormous amount of energy and time just to make changes after the consensus is reached. In theory, because of the way this is set up, a hacker would need to have enough computing power to compete with the entire blockchain network of thousands and thousands of massive computer bases. And that's just to make any retroactive changes. It's virtually, it is impossible. And once we get into post-quantum cryptography, it is lights out. But nobody wants you to know this, and it's just too complicated. Everybody checks out. You don't have to. It's not that hard to understand. Now, let me give you a step-by-step illustration of how this works. Assume 100 transactions. We're almost done. Hang in there. Assume 100 transactions have taken place, and we need to validate all 100. So all 100 are put into a block. All the computers or miners, known as nodes, which are connected to the network through the existing protocols of internet, they compete to mine these transactions. Well, how do they compete? What do you mean? What do they play basketball? No. Here's what they do. They take all 100 transactions plus a timestamp of when the block was hashed. Remember that hashing thing again? There's a difficulty of the block. We'll talk about that later. They take the hash of the previous block. Okay, see that? And then an extra number called a nonce. Now, what do they do with that? They connect them all. All 5 of these inputs are then hashed to find a specific output. We talked about that a little bit ago. The only way to do this is to guess at this nonce because it's the only variable. If all the inputs don't lead to the correct output, the miner has to guess the different nonce because it doesn't work. So everyone, this is all they do. Miners continue to guess until they arrive at the correct output. The math problem is a guess and check problem. The nonce is the only variable. The first miner to guess the right nonce wins the competition, is awarded with money, and it's all preset by the algorithm. All of the other miners who lost the competition because they didn't guess the correct nonce in the output, well, they all double check to make sure he's correct, because if he's not, then it's all game on again. And sure enough, they verify, gosh darn, that guy is right, and they all start over again. And how often does this go on? Every 10 minutes for the last 10 years. Okay, and it's going to go faster as we go. So you say, you got to be kidding me, right? No, you review it later. Okay, it's just hit your page. So let's look at the last one. We're done. Integrated blocks. Blocks are integrated through hashing. Here's how it works. First block we said called the Genesis block. It's different than all the other blocks because there's no block before it. It's hard-coded into the network. When transactions from the blocks are validated, they're hashed. See, now you know what hashed is. Well, or you can just keep telling yourself what it is, then you'll know it. When the second block is validated, the transactions from the second block plus the value of the Genesis block are all used as input to create a unique hash value of the next block. And this continues for every block thereafter, linking all the blocks together, calling it blockchain. See how easy that is? Okay, yeah, you say it's easy, but no. But you go back at your own leisure and study this. The linking of blocks through hashing, that's what makes the ledger immutable. Once the block is linked through hashing, any slight change changes the entire history, which would trigger a chain reaction of changed blocks. Can't be done. The only way to change the ledger is to document a new transaction in the next block. You cannot change the transaction of a previous block once it's been validated. You have to do an entire new transaction in a new block. Now, that leads to amazing stuff. I'll just have to cover that later. A blockchain is immutable due to hashing. No hacker can hack a block. Here's the last slide. We're already here. So why is it so important? It should be obvious. All the records are immutable. Trust is mandated. No confirmation bias, no human intervention. Mathematics eliminate this. All the ledgers are decentralized. The records are not residing with any owner. No Google, no Amazon, no Facebook. Everybody has access to it, but not everybody can see it because of the cryptography and encryption, because of all the hashing and because of all the protection. It disrupts all the status quo. It returns power back to the people. There's no intermediaries, and it levels the playing field. The most incredible technology known to man is here, and hopefully you know just a little bit more about it. Thank you.